My name is Dr. James Rendell. I'm a lecturer in creative industries. I'm the course leader for BA Media, Culture and Journalism. I teach on a range of courses, including MCJ, sports journalism, BA film. I'm a PhD supervisor, and also a researcher. I'm an academic. So I write books and journal articles, particularly around media audiences. I'm really interested in representation and identity, particularly for marginalised groups. And I also collaborate with industry. So I do a lot of audience-based user testing. I support the creative industries through collaboration with media and through government to help the media industries and those that consume it. I think the event has been really positive. Usually students are required to do an academic dissertation, which is a formal bit of independent research that allows them to draw their own data and their own conclusions and arguments. And that piece of assessment is typically aimed at an academic audience. So there's a specific type of understanding that the people you're writing it for will have a general knowledge of your expertise or the subject matter. But what I really like about the symposium is it's thinking about still undertaking independent research, using academic methods, scholarly rigor, but thinking about how do we engage other audiences? How do we get a lay audience or a general audience to understand the intricacies of data and key arguments and key topics, that they can understand those and understand their significance. So, for example, if we're looking at the importance of equality and diversity, for example, particularly for marginalised groups, really important issue. There's lots of academic work on that. How do you engage an audience that typically don't engage with that? Or you're trying to think about the significance that could be at policy level or education, and those can be areas that are politically very important, but you might then be speaking to an audience who want to keep politics out of sports because sports for them is mere entertainment. So I think a symposium really is about using the skills of sports journalists, students, to take something that's really important that they've studied from an academic point of view, and that translatability into creating something that can then be used and have wider application. And that's really important. And that's probably one of the key differences between a dissertation that has its own academic merit and a symposium where it has such a wider application that can benefit the students. And the topics that I've seen so far, really, really important. And the students have been able to demonstrate their own independent knowledge, but also their understanding of what methods are the best methods to get that data, what are the most appropriate samples, what are the limitations of some of these approaches, but also giving us key arguments that knowledge, learning new knowledge is important, but actually there can be wider applicability, that we can take this knowledge and we could give it to an education minister, we could give it to a sports team, we could give it to audiences, and they could better understand the topic that's being explained there. Yeah, so I think it's been really great, really, really positive. So I come from a traditionally sort of academic background, and again, the kind of history of that tends to be, doing academic research, writing that up in academic publications. And again, that comes with a certain expectation in terms of language, key terms and concepts that are aimed at a readership that knows the field, that operates in a similar circle. But I didn't want to just do that. For me, the reason why I enjoy my job, and particularly the research side, is how can I engage other audiences and put that research into other contexts. So I do a lot of work around community cinema and marginalised groups, and by not just teaching it or not just researching or writing about it, I've been able to speak to the BBC and look at case studies in Wales. I've been able to run community cinema events, and those kind of real world practices then feed back into the classroom. So I teach a class, and I even did a module on curation where students do a similar kind of assessment. So being able to talk to different audiences about your research and see the kind of use value, putting theory into practice, that's something I find really rewarding. And whether it be a journalist or a student or an academic, if you kind of have that in the back of your mind when you're doing your research, like what can I do with this? Who can I present it to? It opens up so many more doors in terms of people just reading your work. You can write an academic journal or a book that costs over £100. That's a very limited audience. By re-articulating it or putting it into a different environment, different people are going to engage with it and hopefully get some use out of it. So that's always in the back of my mind then, is how can I get the widest kind of readership possible, and hopefully they can be more out of that. So another example of that would be, for example, I worked on the live music map of Wales, which is an entire we mapped the entire nation of Wales and their live music spaces, everything from big stadiums right through to practice rooms, cafes, bars and restaurants and those kind of things. And we collaborated with Creative Wales and the university. We created this map, this interactive map that's organic. It can be updated by different spaces and companies. And that was in the wake of the pandemic. So there was a need to map this. Previous maps have only worked on regions, such as Newcastle, Birmingham, Liverpool, but we wanted to do a whole nation, and really to help the live music sector grow. So again, that kind of applicability of the research to have a goal, to have an endeavour, and to help, as I say, the live music sector. And that again was a really interesting kind of topic, where taking some of my previous skills in terms of human participant methods, so I was interviewing people and doing surveys and helping to create this digital map, which now keeps going and has allowed for further collaboration. So yeah, it's academics and academic research can benefit from those kind of collaborations as much as the industry or the partner that you're working with. Yeah, there's often sort of unforeseen barriers or issues. I've had doing online research, for example, where one really important forum for my audience research, and this was during my PhD, it went down. It got hacked. And this had years of data, thousands of comments around cinema audiences, and it got hacked. It was an old kind of forum, and I reached out to the people that ran it. They were just fans themselves. They weren't sort of paid to run the website, and they just said, we don't have the money to fix this. And I lost all that data, So often we think, well, if it's online, it's there, it's permanent. That's a real sort of academic strength or a research strength, but it is susceptible to these kind of things. So I lost a ton of data there. Interviewing, getting interviews can be quite difficult, and that can be quite challenging for students as well. Trying to speak to the right people, access to those people. I was doing a research project years ago, looking at how different audiences might create their own content and crafts around different film franchises, and some of these then sell these products on Etsy, for example. Trying to speak to those people that from Etsy, they just did not want to engage because obviously copyright and things like that. Yeah, I'd reach out to them, explain who I was, explain the research project, and they would say no. Everyone said no. So I knew this phenomenon was taking place. I knew I wanted to study it, and I knew I wanted to use human participants as part of that, and they just didn't want to engage. So yeah, there's always barriers to research, and being adaptable to these kind of things can help. I think understanding that research can take a long time as well is another really important thing, and I think that's something the third year students will have come across as well, so that you can have an idea, and getting that idea to its end product can take quite a bit of time. That's a really good question. So certainly the academic underpinning. So if anyone's interested in a topic, I think learning what's been written about it, the different approaches, where there might be competing arguments or approaches, that's really useful for getting a sort of lay of the land, and also thinking about what's informing your ideas. Academic research is never created in a vacuum. It's often a response to something, or if there's a gap in the field in some way. So if you know the field, you know where there's gaps are, and you know those developments are. So really, the easiest way to do research is to understand the research that's been done prior to it. And I think the other side of it is the undertaking of different methods. So with students, I often talk to them about that. You might have an experience of, say, surveys, for example, because they are used in all walks of life. But actually, writing a good survey is really difficult. There's a real art to it, and that's the same with any method. Undertaking a focus group, for example, and getting data that comes out of communal interactions is really useful in the sense that it can be quite time-saving, and it's created by interaction, so your input can be minimized. But again, running a focus group is really, really challenging, and I've run them. I've run them for industry as well. Some have gone well, and some have gone very, very badly. So that can be something to consider. Well, is the strengths and limitations of methods and doing those things. And then finally, I think a really important thing is to consider is research ethics. Depending on the kind of area you go into, whether it be a journalist, or if you work in industry, or if you work in academia, your ethical remit of what best practice in can change. So in academic work, there's a real ethical rigor. You have to use consent forms. You have to have your work approved by the ethics committee. And again, this can be quite timely. If you're working in industry, it might be much quicker. And in journalism, it can be even less so. These kind of things have sort of been subject to changes. So I think if students want to carry on doing academic research, having a good understanding of the ethical considerations of your research, how you engage with your participants and those kind of things is really important as well.